There are a number of famous examples of cities trying to condemn businesses to keep them from moving. The most famous recent example is the so far abortive attempt by the city of Baltimore to condemn the Preakness Stakes horse race to try to keep it from moving. The Preakness Stakes horse race takes place in Baltimore, Maryland at the Pimlico Race Track. It is one of the three major competitive horse races in the U.S., part of the Triple Crown, along with the Belmont and the Kentucky Derby. The Pimlico Race Track, where the Preakness is held, is decaying and it's in a bad neighborhood. The owners of the Preakness would like to move it to a different location in Maryland. The city of Baltimore would like them to stay. Eminent domain is the power of the government to seize property from owners who don't want to sell. If an eminent domain effort succeeds, then the government gets to take the property even if the owners don't want to give it away. They do have to pay compensation, but it will be an amount set by the court following state and federal Supreme Court precedent. So it might not be an amount that's actually acceptable to the owner. All condemnations under the federal Constitution must be for a public use. Some courts have ruled that holding sporting events is a public use, and that, of course, is what horse races are. There are several constitutional issues that arise if a city tries to take a sports franchise by eminent domain to keep it from moving. The U.S. Supreme Court, in the famous case of Kelo versus City of New London, has said that economic development is a public use, even if the ownership of the site is going to be in private hands, and the city's goal here is to promote the local economy. If the city's condemning not just land or other physical property that is located within its jurisdiction, but is also condemning intellectual property such as the franchise's name, the right to play in a particular sports league like the NFL, and so on. There is a question often of where that property is located and whether it is within the city's jurisdiction. So far, there has not been a successful example of a city condemning a sports team or a similar business to keep it from moving. The city of Baltimore back in 1984 did try to condemn the Baltimore Colts franchise, an NFL team, but the Colts almost literally left the city in the dead of night in order to avoid being condemned, and a court ultimately ruled that because they had left, the team was no longer within Baltimore's jurisdiction. There is also the famous case of the city of Oakland's effort to condemn the Oakland Raiders back in the 1980s when they tried to move to Los Angeles, and that produced some relevant precedents from California state courts. They ruled that it was permissible to condemn a sports team in order to promote sports events, but they also ruled that it was a violation of the Dormant Commerce Clause of the federal Constitution. The Dormant Commerce Clause is a provision of the Constitution which is said to prevent state and local governments from interfering with interstate commerce, things like the movement of goods across state lines and other things of this sort. In this case, the move would actually be within a state, but that was also true in the Oakland Raiders case in the 1980s, which is the main precedent on this, where nonetheless a court ruled that the Dormant Commerce Clause prevents the city of Oakland from condemning the Oakland Raiders in order to keep them from moving to Los Angeles. In June, the city of Baltimore agreed to drop the condemnation lawsuit against the Preakness Stakes in exchange for the owners of the Preakness agreeing to negotiate to try to keep the Preakness in Baltimore. However, nothing has really been definitively resolved. As yet, we don't know whether an agreement between the two sides can be reached. This Preakness case raises broader questions of whether cities can condemn businesses. If they can, it might place significant constraints on the mobility of business, but it also is likely to damage those cities in the long run because, of course, businesses are unlikely to want to invest in an area where if things go badly, the city government will condemn them to force them to stay.